Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item this evening is a presentation. I'd like to invite Mr. Barry Parish, and I also understand Mr. Jeff Brace is here as well, to come forward with regards to the Shark Swim Club 50th anniversary.
Thank you. Mayor Stewart and Council, we'd like to thank Council for this opportunity to attend this meeting and help to us celebrate our 50th birthday. A celebration of 50 years of aquatic service to Coquitlam and in particular the youth of our city. We train and compete in 3 major aquatics: swimming, diving, and water polo. Our slogan this year, pretty happy about it, some of our people from the future, striking gold, 50 years strong. And we are very strong, we're very proud, and strong in a whole lot of ways. We develop a lot of people. The Sharks have excelled since their inception in 1960, having won 17 provincial swim championships and 18 diving championships. Since 1992, provincial trophies are presented on a regional basis, so all of these were done prior to 1992, and we belong to Simon Fraser Region, and we're one of the leading clubs in that, and Simon Fraser habitually does very, very well at provincial championships. We're one of our leading clubs. We began in 1960 with a membership of 12. We now have a membership of around about 300 in competing in all 3 of the events. Our 50th celebration started with our dive meet this year. Our dive meet and our annual water polo tournament in early July, and all of these events are, and at these events we introduced our specially minted medals. Our main event will take place this Thursday at a dinner for the alumni and present members on the 22nd. This social event will focus on meeting and greeting past members and they renew friendships, and they're coming all the way in from the Gulf, by the way, the oil patch in the Gulf, near Qatar, and across Canada to be here. Memorabilia and other regalia will be on display for about approximately, we think, about 160 people. Well, unfortunately, the numbers keep rising almost daily. Getting worried about the food. As part of the celebration, some alumni will compete in a special swim event at the Sharks' annual swim meet in Spain on the 24th. We're still not sure whether or not His Worship Mayor Stewart has issued challenges to the mayors of Port Coquitlam and Port Moody to possibly join him in a race with the alumni. Our season is short, from May to August. As a family-oriented organization, we have worked very hard to develop the whole child, to build confidence and passion in sport, to encourage teamwork, and to celebrate accomplishments regardless of age and ability. It's very important to the structure of this club. Yes, we have fast divers, or fast swimmers, good divers, but we take care of every child who wishes to join and better themselves. And by the way, all aldermen and councillors are invited to join us on Saturday at the pool. If you inclined to be there, you're welcome. I think the meet starts at 8. I wouldn't get there at 8, but a little later. The City of Coquitlam has placed priority on the continued operation of this club as an important part of the Coquitlam community through partnering with the Sharks since their inception. Our club contributes to our community through involvement in other community-sponsored aquatic activities, such as our involvement heavily with the Special Olympic movement and their competitions, the swim competitions. We donate equipment as well as our expertise as volunteers and officials. We want to thank the city for joining with us as we celebrate our 50th anniversary. We look forward to providing another 50 years of service to the City of Coquitlam. Sitting behind me, we have some athletes. We had 4. There's a big shark training session going on tonight, so we had to pry these ones away. And I think they want to do something for the organization. Are we ready, ladies? Okay, here we go.
Come on. I feel a little bit guilty that I'm not at the practice tonight as well, but go ahead.
S-H-S-H-A-S-H-A-L-K-S S-H-S-H-A
Well, thank you very much, Barry and Jeff and all the young swimmers. Not often can we celebrate 50 years of an amateur athletic club here in Coquitlam, and it's a great, I remember when I was young, swimming with the Coquitlam Sharks. I think Barry was young then, too. Yeah, we started swimming at Blue Mountain Pool back when there was a Blue Mountain 25-yard pool at Blue Mountain. The photo in front of you is with a whole bunch of kids that I swam with. I think I'm just outside of the photo to the left, thankfully. In Coquitlam, I swam both competitively for the summer club and did water polo. And so it's great to see the work that Coquitlam Sharks does now. My own kids are involved. I actually swam competitively yesterday in Abbotsford. I swam one of the events. Council really supports amateur athletics. City Council wants to do everything we can to make sure our young people have lots of opportunities to be involved athletically. Right before me is Councillor Doug McDonnell, who's the chair of our Leisure and Park Services, or Parks and Recreation Standing Committee, and that one works tirelessly with its members and with all of Council at trying to develop lots of opportunities for amateur athletics. And I want to make a presentation myself. We looked in the budget. This is a tough year, so I purchased it myself. And I'd like the young swimmers to come forward. And Council would like to present you with a mascot. Unveil it for the first time next weekend at the Big Sharks Invitational right here at the Coquitlam. Good stuff. Okay. Oh, Thank you. Oh, Jeff's got it. Okay. Thank you very much. I tried to get as friendly looking a shark as I could get, but thank you very much. A real pleasure having you out here today. Yes, Barry? Go right ahead. Yep. Our swimmers will be leaving. They do have another event tonight, so thank you. And as for the challenge, consider the challenge issued. Mayors Moore and Trazzolini, we'd ask you to please respond quickly and respond with your T-shirt size. I have a I Heart Port Coquitlam and I Heart Port Moody T-shirt from various challenges that other council members issued on my behalf. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Item 2 concerns the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, July 5th. Just prior to requesting that these minutes be approved, there is one small change. It is with Resolution 409. Currently, we have Councillor Reamer as registering opposition, and in fact, that should be Councillor Robinson, just for the record. The staff recommendation is that these minutes be approved as amended.
Sorry, I didn't catch it. It was moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 3 is the minutes of the special council meeting held Saturday, July 10th. The recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4 is the minutes of the special council meeting held July 12th, and recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 5 is the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting of Monday, July 12th. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The first item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns a zoning bylaw text amendment to the R7, RS8, RS9, RS10, and RS11 single-family zones. The recommendation is that Council give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4131, that bylaw 4131 and its related application be referred to public hearing, and that in addition to the regular public hearing notification, request staff to notify the parties identified in bullets 1 to 5 before you.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Reid.
The next item, item 5.3, if I could respectfully ask that that be deferred to the next council meeting or when it comes back from staff.
Move deferral.
Motion from Councillor Reid is deferral. Councillor Asmundson seconds. Any discussion on deferral? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Item 5.4 is a preliminary report on citywide official community plan amendment bylaw 4138 and rezoning amendment bylaw 4139. This relates to 639 Tyndall Street. The recommendation is that council give first reading to OCP amendment bylaw number 4138, first reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4139, and that these two bylaws and their related applications be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5.5 is consideration of fourth and final reading for OCP Amendment Bylaw 3990 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 3991. It's an authorization for the issuance of a development permit for a ground-oriented residential development at 835 Westwood Street. This recommendation from the committee is that this bylaw be given fourth and final reading, that both bylaws be given fourth and final reading, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Lynch. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5.6 is a proposed road cancellation adjacent to 2 King Edward Street. It's bylaw 4124. The recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to highway dedication cancellation bylaw 4124 and direct that this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the community charter.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5.7 is the Maillardville core area, its potential development incentives. The Land Use Committee's recommendations that staff be directed to develop options for several non-financial development incentives for the Maillardville core area, which are identified in the attached report, and further that staff be directed to prepare a proposed revitalization tax exemption program for the core commercial area in Maillardville, analyze potential financial implications, and return with a detailed program for council review.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
5.9 is the potential establishment of an economic development and investment advisory panel. The recommendation is that council approve the proposed economic development investment advisory panel and instruct staff to report back to a subsequent executive meeting regarding membership.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, Councillor Sikora has pushed his button, so we'll try again. Councillor, okay, no, again. All in favor?
Leave it alone.
Opposed? Carried.
Item 6 concerns the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting held Monday, July 12th. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'll just have a quick explanation. Councillor Sikora did withdraw his request to speak on the last item. I guess under pain of, anyway, a threat of something.
I get slapped quite often, you know, so it starts to hurt.
Okay. The spay and neuter bylaw isn't meant to apply to him, Councillor Reid. Mr. Clerk.
Item 6.3 concerns an off-leash strategy in the city center area. This is a phase 2. The recommendation of the committee is that council direct staff to consult further with citizens in the area on the following 3 proposed locations for off-leash sites in the city center area: Glen Park, northwest corner of Town Center Park, and the trail system along the west side of the Coquitlam River.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I'm going to support this, but I want to be clear that with the budget that right now is $80,000, I'm just concerned about managing expectations, and I want to make sure that when, you know, costs come in, that we don't start looking at what $120,000 will get us. So if the budget is 80, like, I don't want to see something that sort of has some suggestions that if we just did this, it's only going to cost an extra $15,000 and it comes in at 95. So if that's the budget, I think we ought to stick to it as the upper limit. So I'm just feeling anxious that people are going to start expecting more than we can possibly give them. So.
Okay. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm wondering, you know, we talked about these 3 places for off-leash dog park. I wonder, when can we see some action in these places? You know, the one on Monday Park is not quite ready. Understandably, it'll be ready very soon. But by now we...
Actually, on a point of clarification, the one on Mundy Park is open.
Is it open? Wasn't aware of it. Okay. Anyways, if it's open, I'm kind of happy that it's done. But the other 3 is Glen and Town Center and by Coquitlam River. Now, we talked about this some time ago, and I'm wondering how long will it be before any more of these come aboard? It's, you know, they're badly needed in our community.
Ms. McKay.
At this time, staff are engaged in the community consultation phase, working with the community to determine if one of these 3 might be the best choice. After we finish the consultation, we'll be coming back to council to seek approval to proceed to the next phases, which would be the design process and then the building process. So it'll be very much informed by the input that we get from the community on choosing the merits of one of these sites.
Okay, when are you going to start the consultation, and you know, I know that you have to go through a public consultation, but then it takes a little while, so I wonder when we can see something that is happening, because I'll tell you, I get approached by many dog owners when I go for a cup of coffee. There's many dog owners who say, when are you going to build some more off-leash dog parks, which I think is needed in this community.
Ms. McKay.
Through the chair, we'll be happy to update council on the timeline for development when we report back on the results of the consultation. And in light of the other priority work that council has established, we can expect to clarify the timing of this project as well as other projects as part of the 2011 budget process when we map out our 5-year plan.
Now, in fairness, we've already done a bunch of public consultation on the issue of a town center dog off-leash area, and this is the next phase of it that we're talking about. Councillor Skor.
So possibly sometimes at the end of 2011.
Ms. McKay.
Possibly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, the motion is to further the public consultation process. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is the minutes of a special Strategic Priorities Administration Protective Services Standing Committee meeting of July 10th. The recommendation is to receive these minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item of business arising out of this committee's meeting concerns the assessment criteria for Northeast Coquitlam development applications. This recommendation is that Council direct staff to establish a set of assessment criteria to guide the evaluation of development applications in this area that reinforces the overall direction and community development vision in the original neighborhood plans, while providing opportunities for the development of new innovative site and neighborhood-sensitive housing forms in the area.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is the minutes of the Strategic Priorities Administration Protective Services Standing Committee meeting of July 12th. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is a bylaw for fourth and final reading. The subject is the Smoking Control Bylaw, amending bylaw number 4125. The recommendation is that Council give consideration to fourth and final reading of Smoking Control Bylaw, amending bylaw 4125.
Sorry, moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Robinson.
I just have a question to staff. I've already received some queries from residents about when would this go into effect and how will it be communicated?
I can answer the first part of that question. In the bylaw itself, under 6.3, it says the bylaw will come into force and effect on the date of adoption.
So it comes into effect as of tonight? And so what's the lead-up time? Sort of how do we what's the plan to communicate it, and the question was, the resident said, that I got emails from was, so at what point can I go to the businesses and say, excuse me, but these people can't smoke here? I guess starting tomorrow?
I guess starting tonight, if
Tonight?
you wanted to.
Yeah, before midnight, you can have a hanging.
Yes,
Mr. Dumont.
it's in effect as of council adopting it. I'm meeting with communication staff and bylaw staff tomorrow morning, so I will discuss
Great.
us getting the word out to the
Great,
public.
thank you.
I just want to clarify that despite Councillor Sikora's comment, hanging isn't in the penalty section of this bylaw. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. You know, I guess smoking is, as I said before, is a rotten habit. I had it for many years. I quit in 1972, feel a lot better for it. But however, you know, I've had a lot of comments from different people, older senior citizens, plus a lot of young people. Wherever I go in a coffee shop to have a cup of coffee or whatever it is, I have people asking me, telling me how they think that this bylaw is actually they use the term dumb bylaw. How are you going to enforce it? Well, you can't explain it to them how you're going to enforce it. You know, so I mean, you know, it's a bylaw that we pass, and these are some of the things that I think Councillor Reimer said that she wanted to have a committee struck to look at all our bylaws. This would be one of them that I guess would give them a great deal of problems as far as seeing what they could do with it. But, you know, to me, I think what we're doing is passing bylaws for the sake of bylaws, and it looks good in print, it looks good on TV, it looks good until you start really looking into it and saying, how are you going to enforce this bylaw? Oh, well, we're not going to enforce the bylaw, but however, it's there. You know, I mean, you're going to, you know, as I said before, after 9 o'clock in the evening, we have no bylaws in this municipality. There are no bylaw enforcement officers. So now, you're going to phone the police station saying, will you please send a police officer because there's somebody smoking and I don't like it. I mean, that somehow he's going to rush up there to write a $10,000 ticket or whatever it is. You know, this is how silly this thing is getting. I mean, it really is a silly bylaw. So I can't support it. Not that it's not good for people's health. I think that everybody should quit smoking. I believe it's very, very important to people's health and everything else. But however, it's a bylaw that's non-enforceable. Non-enforceable.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Well, I just wanted to share my experience this weekend. I was up at the Blue Mountain Music Festival, and I noticed that some of the organizers had some signs up saying there was no smoking allowed, and there was no smoking in the entire park, neither night that I was there, so there was no enforcement required, and the bylaw hasn't even been passed, but just a couple signs up telling people not to smoke, and they obeyed.
Thank you very much. And I sort of have the same feeling. I think there are lots of bylaws that we pass that we don't actively enforce every single day. There's a bylaw against littering. There's a bylaw against dumping. We know that there are people that litter and there are people that dump their stuff. And when we catch them, we throw the book at them to the extent that we can. Now, there's limits to what we can do, but the vast majority of our residents are law-abiding citizens and will abide by the law. And the vast majority of our businesses will enforce it to the extent that they can outside their business because they don't want to run afoul of the bylaw either. I suspect that this is one of those. I think it is enforceable. I think it's enforceable because anyone that goes through a coffee shop, that group of people in front of a coffee shop, and they're all smoking, if our bylaw enforcement officer goes past there, that's a pretty simple thing to do, to sit down and either talk to people to make sure they understand it or simply write tickets. I'd expect each one of these businesses as well will post signs to say that, no, you can't smoke here. And more than that, they'll pull away the ashtrays because you can't smoke anymore. And there's no point to have ashtrays on those tables, and that alone will send a signal. But most importantly, I think, we unanimously went to the public on this one. We said, should we ask to the public in the last by-election, the by-election that elected Councillor Nicholson, should we impose these restrictions on smoking? And these are the restrictions we put before them, and the vast majority of people said yes. 3/4 of the people that were polled, or that came out to vote that day, said yes, these are appropriate restrictions. We can't vote against them now because we unanimously said we were going to ask the public what they thought. And the public having told us what they think, we pretty much, I think, have a duty to the public to do as they told us they'd like us to do. If we don't intend to follow the instructions of our electorate, I don't think we should ask their opinions on things. This one, we ask their opinions, I think we have to abide by it. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 10 is, concerns a high-density mixed-use development at 580 Clarke Road. The recommendation is that Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3987, and that Council approves the signing and sealing of development permit for 580, 584, and 590 Clarke Road, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute the permit.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, I realize this is transit-oriented development, but when we look back to the application sheet that we had here, we're still significantly under what our bylaw says in parking. And I'm having a problem with this. I did when it came before us before. And one of the answers I got back was, well, it's going to be high density like Lougheed Mall. You're going to have a little smaller than Lougheed Mall, but you're going to have people coming there and shopping at the new Safeway and all the other new stores, and there'll be lots of parking for visitors to come and visit and stay on site. Well, we know what happens at Lougheed Mall. Everyone gets ticketed. You're either there to shop at Lougheed Mall if you park your car and hop on and go visit your friends who are living there, or hop on the SkyTrain. It's just a massive problem. All we asked for was what the bylaw requirement said, and this went back to staff last meeting, and it's come back. And I'd like to ask Ms. Tiffany, if I could, in this you said that they've increased their visitor stalls, but still not up to bylaw, correct? And what have they done with the, where you've got resident 441 spaces? They're nowhere near that either, if I look at your revised list on page 2.
Through your worship, that's correct. The applicant has come back with a revision to what they're proposing for their parking allocation. What they are proposing to do is to allocate more parking spaces to the visitor as opposed to the residential parking stalls. So for phase 1, they would be at 100% for their visitor parking stalls, utilizing their phase 2 site to accommodate the remaining visitor stalls. There are some site constraints with regard to this development. We realize that there is a variance to the parking, but from staff's perspective, they're within the 30% variance reduction for parking that's provided for under the Coquitlam neighborhood plan.
Thank you. And my problem is more practical and logical. We've got Emerson building up with townhouses along there. We've recently had that horrible big fire at the complex right behind the Safeway. They're all townhouses. We're going to have a street parking situation there like you wouldn't believe. People aren't going to be able to move. There's no parking on Como Lake anywhere, so Emerson's going to have to take all of off-street parking, or all the little side streets between Dogwood and Bresley and all those other little streets in there. And that's entirely unfair to the people that are living there. We're going to have more and more density on this site, and somehow we're going to have to meet our parking requirements. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but I'm really not happy with this at all. And I sent it back once, and it's back again. And, you know, it's fine for him to say, oh, yeah, we'll use some of our allocation from phase 2 because it's not built yet. Well, when it gets to phase 2, how are they going to manufacture some more parking spots? They're not. And because it's a transit-oriented, because the SkyTrain's stopping there, it's a triple problem. We're going to have some real neighborhood problems there if the buildings that are coming in do not have sufficient parking. So I'm afraid I can't support this the way it is. Thank you. And 30% is a huge variance.
Anything further? No. You're done. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. My question is also related to transportation services. It talks about an enhanced pedestrian environment. And I'm just curious if we could just hear a little bit more about what an enhanced, on page 4, the bottom. An enhanced pedestrian environment is, given that this is going to be a major transit hub, I just want to have some clarity of what that means.
Worship, through your worship, the enhanced pedestrian environment is wider sidewalks to accommodate higher volumes of pedestrian activity, hopefully going to a transit station in the future, as well as the implementation of the Coquitlam design guidelines, which does incorporate street tree plantings to make it for a more conducive walking environment.
Okay, so one of my concerns is actually bicycle related, because bikes are going to be, you can take them on SkyTrain, and it's going to be coming right through there, and I want to make sure that we have enough enhancement to recognize that when you're going to SkyTrain, most people are going to ride their bikes onto the sidewalk to ride them to the train, and I want to make sure that we have considered that kind of traffic, given the, folks, given that there'll be parking challenges, will be parking perhaps a couple of blocks away. Those lots of folks walking, and you'll have cyclists. And I have a little bit of anxiety, given that we haven't done this before, and I want to make sure we get it right.
Fair enough. Councillor Skora.
Thank you, Mayor. Here's a situation that we're starting to relax all the parking on every building in Coquitlam, wherever it may be, even long before SkyTrain is here. I think that, like this one here, you're giving them from 695 stalls to 605 stalls. That's 91 stall shortage. I'd rather have them meet the parking standards and have enough parking than having our bylaw enforcement officer towing cars and all kinds of problems that we may have. I don't think our city needs these kind of problems. We've gone by for many years without having these kind of restriction problems in parking. I know where I live, there's a lot of ample parking, and it's great to see. But quite often, even in my building, there's a lot of the visitors' parking lots are full. They're full of visitors, and it's great to see that there's enough parking being provided. But in here, what we're doing is even looks like about a 30% break on parking, and I don't know how we come about whether we have a study, traffic study, whatever it is that we're doing. But whatever we're doing is certainly not a right thing for this city. I think we're going to be looking for a lot of trouble. It's nice to say, well, SkyTrain is coming, you don't need a car, you jump on a SkyTrain and away you go. What about people that will use their car because they're businessmen or many other things, and they don't go from point A to point B? They may be dropping to a lot of businesses during their route to downtown Vancouver or wherever they may be. And to me, Mayor, I think we're doing a very, very great disservice. And of course, there'll be shopping center next to there and a few other things. And you think that the people are not going to be parking in that parking lot and the shopping center also? There'll be, people will come to shop, and if they can't get a parking spot, they're not going to go there. So it's going to hit our businesses along there. So these are the things that I think are just, we're asking for a lot of trouble. So I cannot support it no how. Unless we start going back to the parking standards that we have had in the city, and let's see, maybe 10, 15 years from now, see if there really needs changing or not. But to just change it right now, before even the SkyTrain has been announced, I'm not saying that it's not coming or anything else, but before it's announced and a few other things, and before it's built, that somehow we're ready to cut all these parking stalls down. And, the developers will, of course, they're here today, they're gone tomorrow, and we're left with the headache. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Also, the other thing I didn't get addressed was the loading zone space. Some few months ago, our committee said that we wanted to see loading spaces for all apartments, and preferably on-site loading spaces. At the bottom of page 3, there's an off-street loading space, and they say that they've reduced it from 1 off-street space to 0. And that was an important consideration for us, too. I mean, I'd like to see this development go ahead, but We can't keep cutting corners. We start now, we're going to be cutting and cutting and cutting. We're going to have another 3 or 4 high-rises coming on that site. We've got to have places for people to be and visitors to come. People don't live in silos. So I have great difficulty with this as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got the staff recommendation is before us. The staff have worked with the proponent, the property owner, and have worked out a number of details. I'm not going to try and second guess them, but I do acknowledge, the concern, for example, Councillor Robinson raised the question of bike storage, not so much bike storage, the operation of bicycles related to the transit. I'm going to raise the question as to what extent do we own part of the responsibility for the storage of bicycles? I suspect that, and I look at other transit-oriented neighborhoods where bike storage at a location is an issue, where they have bike lockers and such. Are those all TransLink, or any of them owned or installed by an adjacent property owner, to the extent that that might actually be a more efficient way of doing it? And I put that to go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good question. Typically, how planning staff deal with the issue of bike storage is on a case-by-case basis. I shouldn't just say planning staff, but also transportation services staff. When a variance comes forward for parking or for some other transportation-related reduction that's in the zoning bylaw, Transportation Services has worked to obtain something in return, like bike storage or a car share vehicle or carpooling spaces, dedicated spaces, something of a transportation demand management measure that addresses or encourages the alternative use of transportation modes and not just the driving of a vehicle. It's been the standard policy of staff over the last several years, and we've worked with it on a case-by-case basis as these variances come forward. Now, the other part of your question, I believe, was with regard to requirements. I know that some cities have incorporated actual bike parking space requirements within their zoning bylaw. The City of Coquitlam does not do that, but I know that some places like Vancouver, I don't believe of Richmond, but a few other municipalities I do know actually have bike storage space requirements similar to parking space, vehicle parking space requirements in their zoning bylaw.
Thank you. I thank you, and I think if we're going to truly embrace the bicycle as a mode of transportation, I think we have, and we ought to, then we are going to have to embrace the reality of where to put them when people aren't using them, and that's it might be something for a future staff report related to the refinement of our parking requirements. We do want fewer people to drive their cars. We want transit-oriented neighborhoods that embrace that and allow families to have perhaps just one car, in some cases none, if they live right on a transit line. This goes partway down there, but where do we put the alternative to the car? And in many cases, that's on 2 wheels. So, thank you. Any other? Oops, Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I'm having difficulty accepting this as well. And the big stumbling block for me is the loading zone. And in this complex, there will be a couple of hundred people there. I live on a relatively short street, and during the course of a day, there are always cars coming from the Brick or a delivery from some other big company, Sears, the Bay, not even to mention people moving in and out of the building. Well, in this area where there are a lot of townhouses and limited off-street parking, it's just too much. We had a big discussion about this at council with council members, and it was all agreed by us at the time that we didn't want to visit this bit about on-street loading, and especially in this area. So for me, this is a big stumbling block, and I don't think I'll be able to support it just because of that reason.
Okay.
Your Worship, would it help if I deferred this back to staff? I think that's probably a better move than doing anything else.
There's one moment, please. Staff have a comment.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This bylaw is at fourth reading. It expires today. If it does expire and it's not given fourth reading, then we are back to a new public hearing and first reading and basically starting over again with this application.
So delaying it a week isn't possible. It's delaying it for months, or is there an alternative then for us to embrace some of the comments that have been made around here, particularly related to off-street storage, off-street parking, and off-street loading?
No, and parking.
And parking. Is there an alternative?
Could I move forth reading, Your Worship, with conditions?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. The alternative.
So, Your Worship.
It's been suggested by staff that you're right. We could move a fourth reading with. I have a point of information from Councillor Asmundson, and then we'll get back to Councillor Reid. Councillor Asmundson's microphone, please.
Just clarify, is it possible, I guess, for Councillor Reid to give an extension at this time to the permit, or is that not possible from the time from council tonight?
One 6-month extension was granted for this bylaw. I believe, let me just double check the zoning bylaw, but we might be able to grant this another 6-month extension. However, as I understand, the applicant is anxious to begin construction on this project. They are very serious about proceeding forward, so I'm not sure. They may have some concerns about another 6-month delay, but...
Well, mine is not for the full 6 months, but it would give us time to...
Okay, that was a point of information. There's someone with the floor, and I suspect that we're going to end up with a motion to approve subject to some conditions, and that might be the best way under the circumstances. Councillor Reid.
So I would move that number 1 and number 2 would become, or part of number 1 would be, provided that issues of bicycle storage, of parking to bylaw standards, and providing an on-site loading area to be addressed.
I would consider the parking to bylaw standards to be we're going to have an applicant back before us, I suspect.
Well, we have bylaw standards with respect to visitor parking and other parking. So if there's a better way to put that, Mr. Gilbert will tell me how. Our resident genius.
I'm not some of the technical aspects of that, but I think we can, what I was going to suggest actually was, given that staff was looking at some of the bylaw considerations regarding extensions and stuff like that, perhaps we could table this item for the moment and proceed, and perhaps staff will have that final information in a few more minutes?
Sure, that's fine.
If that is okay with the rest of council.
That makes good sense. I'll order the item tabled, and we'll come back to that. Consider that item in a few minutes. Staff are meanwhile going to work through that. They may have to suspend their looking through that until we're finished with the items related to the land use.
With council's permissions, I will clear the queue then, and we'll move on to item 11.
Very good. We'll start a new queue at that moment.
Item 11 is a report of the city clerk. It concerns an application for a food primary liquor license involving patron participation in the extension of hours of liquor service. This is for JJ Music Box Bar and Grill. The staff recommendation is that council will advise the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch that it does not support the application by JJ Music Box Bar and Grill, and 2, that the associated report for this item be forwarded to the LCLB to serve as council's comment on the application.
Give the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Reamer, the staff recommendations. Any discussion? Okay, seeing Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support this. We asked these people to go to public consultation. They did their public consultation. The public consultation is overwhelmingly in support of their application. The negative comments that we see are not based on this applicant. They're based on the nature of the business and perhaps things that happen several miles away at organizations in a similar line of business. This applicant has put forward a solid application. He's done everything that we might have expected him to do. And I think he's entitled to the benefit of the doubt. I think he's entitled to go forward, to have his application heard by the Liquor Board on its merits. If they grant him a license, If we subsequently have difficulties, we have all kinds of abilities to deal with difficulties in any place in our community. But to preclude a local businessman with, I think, a 4-year history with no complaints from taking a step to expand his business seems to me to be entirely inappropriate. And I would move to amend the recommendation to support the application.
I don't think I'll be able to accept the amendment as not entirely contradictory to the motion. The motion is that we let liquor licensing, control and licensing branch know that the council doesn't support it, and to amend that to say that we do support it is the opposite of the motion, and therefore you'll have to allow this motion to pass its course and be defeated. To amend it to be the opposite of what it says, I think is...
Thank you. Okay. You know how I will vote.
So I understand. Unless there's someone that wants to challenge that, that's fine with me. Seeing none, Councillor Reid.
I'm noticing some of the comment sheets. People live on Camelback Court in Coquitlam, on Inlet in Coquitlam. There's some from Vancouver here. There aren't what I'd call neighbors who have a vested interest in this. So I can't support this. Glencoe Drive, Port Moody. Alexander Bay, Port Moody. Fairview, Port Moody. They certainly won't hear the noise from there. So Finch Court, Coquitlam. I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Robinson.
Well, there are also plenty from Anson and Lincoln comments and there are no residences around there. That it's a business district. So, and there are certainly plenty of folks from those businesses who do support it, and there are a couple that don't. So, I'm always struck with the challenge of trying to anticipate, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to anticipate: will this be a good contribution to our community or not? And so how do we look into the future? I don't have a crystal ball. I have no way of predicting. So I can only use whatever history we have for this particular business. I do know that there have been historically some challenges with karaoke businesses, but they're not all the same. And then I'm struck with this decision that we're going to come up, I think it's the next item, around doing better business with Korea and establishing ties with Korea. And my understanding is that a lot of these karaoke places, they come from, I understand, I think it's Japan or Korea or one of the Asian countries, and this is part of their cultural experience. The British, thank God, brought us the pub, and I'm so grateful for that. And this is another cultural experience. So, based on all the information that has been presented to me, I can't in good conscience I guess, support the recommendation, because I don't have any evidence that would suggest that this particular business would be a problem. And if we're really wanting to move ahead and become more urban, give people a place to go in the evenings, then I think we ought to be supporting this business and not providing a barrier. So I won't be supporting, it's always hard in the negative, but I won't be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. This guy must have a lot of relatives in different municipalities. I mean, the fact is that they're in Anmore, they're in Port Moody, they're in other municipalities, and some of them just, the fact is, it doesn't even have an address or anything else, just okay. And that's all there's on there. And to me, I think that we now have enough, enough watering holes in Coquitlam that we don't need any more, and the RCMP have said they have had concerns in here. So, I mean, who do you listen to? Do I want to create some problems? No, I think, matter of fact, this place I don't think has a liquor license at all, does it?
No.
I don't believe it has a liquor license.
No.
It doesn't serve it.
you know, so, you know, look, we were, just a few weeks ago, the KEG asked for a 1-hour extension to their liquor license on Friday and Saturday, and we turned it down. And then we came back on and realized that the bylaw, that what we passed was not exactly what we wanted to. So, you know, I think that what the staff have said, that they cannot recommend it, I don't think that this council can really recommend it. Because when you said you're going to go and study the neighborhood to see whether the license should be granted or not, it's not the neighborhood. How can Anmore be a neighborhood? How can Port Moody be in the neighborhood? How can Port Coquitlam be a neighborhood? And way up in northeast or in Maillardville, how that can that be in a neighborhood? You know, so really I cannot support it. Sorry, I will support the motion that's on the floor, but I will not support them getting a license. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm in a similar vein. I've got concerns about the fact that we've been pretty consistent across the city. This council has typically rejected extensions of liquor licenses. The KEG was seen as a special circumstance. They wanted Friday and Saturday nights. Council did approve that. To the extent that we can approve or reject of anything because of the rules that are given to us by the Liquor Control and Licensing Act. In this circumstance, we asked for a public consultation so that we would be allowed to comment. Council's perspective before the public consultation was that the majority of council were opposed to the idea of granting a liquor license to this particular establishment. And it was partly based, I suspect, as it was, at least in my own opinion, it was based on the experience in other jurisdictions, but also the experience in Coquitlam in other establishments. Now, I accept that translating that experience to this establishment may not be perfect, but the best experience we have is what has happened in the past with in similar circumstances, and in the past we've had challenges. So I came into this not wanting to approve a liquor license in this particular establishment, and I still don't, although I've heard compelling arguments, and I've heard arguments that suggest that maybe we have to be more accepting of this sort of thing. I note, as Councillor Reid did, going through these comment sheets, that there are people from other communities. There are certainly people from locally here. I know that some of the people from local are not residential addresses. These are commercial addresses. In one case, the person lists their address as the, I think it's Rue's Pub. So I assume that's someone that works there or someone that spends a lot of time there. But that's not quite in the center of where we're trying to deal. We're trying to improve and create a city center that's lively, that's vibrant, and that doesn't have some of the challenges that other urban centers have. Those two might be in conflict because as we stick our neck out as a community, we stick our neck out into areas that are more prone to have problems, but also potentially create the kind of vibrant excitement we have in city centers. I'm going to still vote against this one, but I do want council, I want us all to contemplate how we want the city center to evolve. In the end, we're voting voting in favor of the recommendation, voting against the liquor license. But I suspect that since the decision isn't even ours, the decision belongs to the Liquor Control and Licensing Board. We don't know what's going to happen with this, but we should set our mind as a council to what kind of excitement, what kind of experience we want people to have in our city center, because we're also going to be approving a bunch of residential in these neighborhoods. Last comment, this particular establishment's in a strip mall, very small strip center, and I don't know that those are particularly conducive to the kind of establishment that we don't typically have our pubs, although one of our largest pubs is in that kind of a facility, although it's a larger parking area. So I'm hesitant on that front as well, that we end up with a strip mall that's been created for retail and becomes something else through the accident of who leased it or who purchased the building. So I'm going to vote in favor of the staff recommendation at this point. Any other speakers, any other comments? Seeing none. All in favor of the staff recommendation? All opposed? Councillor Robinson and Councillor Nicholson are opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moving on to item 12, this is a report of the Manager of Economic Development, and it's a recommendation for a trip to South Korea and China in the fall of 2010. The recommendation is that Mayor Stewart, one council member to be selected by council, and the Manager of Economic Development use the remaining provincial sister city grant funds to support a proposed trip to South Korea and China.
Councillor.
Second.
Okay, now it's moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I'm in full agreement with this and support it. I think that it's important that we finish what we started, getting relationship back and forth with Korea and China. I'd like to propose an amendment, however, to the recommendation. I would like to amend that to that the mayor, city manager, and staff member to be determined by the mayor and city manager.
I'll second that.
Use the remaining funds.
Okay, on the amendment is that the mayor and city manager and one more staff member determined by those two, and the rest of the motion as it currently exists. Yes. We'll go to another queue for the amendment unless, are there people who wish to speak to the amendment?
Enable QB now.
Okay, go ahead. Anyone that wants to speak to the amendment. Please activate your microphone if you want to speak to the amendment. We've enabled QB. There we go. You're up, Councillor Reid.
I'm so excited. Finally got it on. I voted against this recommendation of trip to sunny Korea and China. I still am not thrilled about it. But after listening to you tell me all the benefits we're going to get, massive hotels and huge shopping centers and all of this that you're going to bring back, you've persuaded me to look at it again. I believe that Councillor McDonnell made, I think, was your recommendation that it was Mayor Stewart and the city manager?
The motion before us now is an amendment. The mayor, city manager,
I totally agree with the city manager and Mayor Stewart. And the only reason I'm going to agree to that is, one, it's been pointed out to me that we have the money, and if we give it back to the province, we may never see it again. So we might as well take advantage of it. And I'm holding my nose while I'm making this reservations that I have against this. But the amount of money we have will clearly be able to go to Korea and China and come back. It will not support a third person going. So I do not support a third person going whatsoever from staff or from council. And I would like to speak to that. I guess I can't amend the amendment, can I? Because if I could, I would just say that Mayor Stewart and Mr. Steblin should be the two that go, because they already have the relationship established. That's what I have to say.
Okay, and I'm actually going to speak quietly to that one element. I suspect, though, that if in the discussion of council has been that we have the money left over from the program that was intended to help us develop a relationship in Korea. We have done we're partway down that road. The money that's left would get us back, which was always intended. If, in fact, the money that's left doesn't, if it's insufficient to be able to send 3 people, I think it would be, I think the motion would accept sending 2 people. I think that was envisioned in the amendment, that obviously the third person would be as determined, but if there's not money, there wouldn't be a third person. So I don't know if that satisfies the concern that Councillor Reid raised. No, it doesn't. I think just the 2 of you should go. You have the relationship. If somebody has to go, then it should be you 2 and nobody else. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm going to take that as under advisement, because I think, I don't know whether this amendment will carry, but if the amendment carries and the motion carries, then we won't be left with room for the amendment.
It is possible to propose a sub-amendment.
Okay, that's what it is. It's a sub-amendment.
Oh, we don't have any cues left. Okay. Okay, moved by Councillor Reid and seconded by Councillor Robinson to amend the amendment to allow that the mayor and the city manager are part of the trip and that's it. Other than, by way of explanation as well, council has intended to invite business people, not so much invite them, but to develop a group of business people from Korea primarily, or perhaps Canadian business people that want to visit Korea and do trade mission work there, to go with us. And we'd end up with a contingent from Coquitlam promoting Coquitlam. The others, though, would be funded of their own accord, and would probably be flying in a better part of the airplane than the mayor and the city manager. So that's the sub-amendment, the amendment to the amendment. Are there any speakers to that? Put your hand up, please. Councillor Nicholson on the amendment to the amendment.
I can't support the sub-amendment. I believe that the motion as amended so ably by Councillor McDonnell put it right where I wanted it to be. The mayor, the city manager, and a staff member selected by them. There's been one trip. The relationships at the political and senior admin level have begun to be developed, and they need to be further developed and brought to fruition. And staff needs to be there to support that action and to come back loaded with all the work that's going to need to be done after the trip to bring things to action. So we need the 3 people.
That was Councillor Nicholson speaking against the amendment to the amendment. Councillor Robinson.
I supported this amendment because when we think about continuity, these are the 2 individuals who had been there before. They will be supported by 8 businessmen. And the truth is that I think that we have a talented city manager, we have a mayor who is very good at learning Korean very quickly, continues to impress us, and is very able, I think, to sell our city. And I am always concerned when we say that we have the money for this trip. There's always surprises, and I don't think our taxpayers need to be surprised. And it's also this idea of use it or lose it. And I think it's what do we need to do in order to maximize? And I think this is what we need to do in order to maximize. And if there's a bit of money left over, if there's a bit of extra, can we help subsidize some of these businessmen? I think there are other opportunities that are better spent, other options to better spend these resources. These are still taxpayer dollars, and I'm looking for what is the best way for us to make the most use of these funds. And I think that just sending our mayor and city manager is sufficient.
Very good. Any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much.
One more. Okay.
I've always had mixed feelings with any sister cities. Nothing ever materialized. Prior to me going to Ottawa, Coquitlam never had a sister city for that reason, because nothing ever materialized. After I went to Ottawa, there certainly has been 3 now sister cities, maybe 4. That Coquitlam has put forward. And, I'm beginning to wonder, why are we doing what we're doing? The fact is, if I thought for 1 minute that this trip is going to bring something forward to this city, I'd support it in a minute. But it won't. And I can tell you, you'll be sitting here 3 years later, nothing is going to happen. And just to go ahead and use up some of the money that the provincial government gave us, maybe they should give it back to us so we can pay our HST with it, rather than paying for some trip. So, I wish it was different. I wish I felt a little different about it, but I don't. And I don't think that any good will come out of it. Just another trip to Korea and to China. Like the last one that we went to Korea, something wonderful was going to happen around Lafarge Lake and a few other things. Whoop-de-doo. It fell apart as fast as it was mentioned. And it's going to still keep on falling apart, because the little businessmen will come aboard. But the big businessmen, you think they're going to come in and they're going to come to Coquitlam, the big businessmen? Of course they're not. People with billions of dollars want their money being used now, and they want to do something with it now. Coquitlam is not ready to do anything right now. We have no land for sale, so what are they going to do? We have no land for sale. We may have in a few months' time. These people are not interested in a few months' time. They're interested in the city. They say, we welcome you. Which land do you want, and how soon do you want it? You know what I mean? So I'm talking from experience in this city, and that's exactly what's been happening. We're slow movers. We don't cut the red tape. We don't do anything to invite big businesses to Coquitlam. And why? Because 95% of this council is not businessmen, so they don't know how to go about it. In the staff is the same thing. Who we got in the staff that's a business person? We don't have anybody that came out of the private sector outside of Mr. Zuzak, our engineer, that came from a private sector. So there's a big difference between business and private sector. There's a big business between trying to bring developers into this city and not bringing developers in the city. There's a different language that you speak to these people. And believe me, I know it. I've been there, so I know it. I've been a businessman all my life. So you know what, Mayor? Good luck to you. I hope that you'll come back and bring a lot of business with you. But you know something? I got a feeling, and I'd hope you'd prove me wrong, a year and a half, 2 years from now, unless something that's fabricated, it's just not going to happen. So we'll be sitting here again, spending some more money, and making that trip, and nothing will happen. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay, Councillor Sikora, out of deference to you, the motion we're debating right now, though, is 2 versus 3. So are we sending 2 or are we sending 3? Are there any others? Are there any other speakers to the 2 versus 3 question? Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I support sending 3 people, and I think that the mayor and city manager are quite capable of determining who that third staff person should be. So I'm going to vote against the sub-amendment, and we'll see where it goes from there. Thank you. I just want to say as well that I think from their perspective, our sister city's perspective, I think we would look better having 3 people attend rather than 2. I really think that that would just be better perception if we send 3 instead of 2. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers to the sub-amendment. I will comment that I quite frankly, I'm torn on this one. I realize that as we're taking with us a contingent of business people, that is the game. That is the intent here, is that we would take some business people from Coquitlam. I think will be perceived as being a larger group, whether we're 2 or whether we're 3 from the city. I think both of them have their advantages. Sending 2 would allow us perhaps some flexibility related to some other promotional work that we have to do while we're both leading up to the trip and following up from the trip. As well as on the trip itself, is to make sure that we have the capacity to make a good impression. So I'm comfortable either way. I don't see any other speakers. I'm going to call the vote on the sub-amendment. The sub-amendment is that we would send, that the amendment would read 2. That would be Mr. Steblin and myself on that. All in favor of that? All opposed to that? I see Councillor Reamer, Councillor Asmundson, Councillor McDonnell, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Sikora opposed. That motion carries. So we're back to 3. Because you were speaking against going, and now you're sending all 3. Okay, that's fine. Okay, and so now we're back to the amendment. There was a speaker's queue that we got rid of on QB. Now, the motion before us is to send 3, but the third one would be determined by the city manager and myself. Be a staff person determined by the city manager and myself. Thank you for the clarification. Councillor McDonnell, did you have anything further on that? Councillor Sikora?
No, thank you.
Councillor Nicholson?
I'm in favor of this amendment.
Councillor Reid?
Me?
Yes, you were on QB before, but yes.
I don't know. I'm not going to support this. So.
Okay, no, okay, that's fine. So This is an amendment to the staff recommendation. The amendment reads that 3 people would attend, but the third person would be, well, actually, the second person is Mr. Steblin. The third person would be a staff person determined by Mr. Steblin and myself. So is the amendment. Any further discussion? All in favor of the amendment? All opposed to the amendment? Councillor Robinson, Councillor Sikora, Councillor Reid, and Councillor Lynch are opposed. The amendment carries. The motion before us now is the staff recommendation amended to read Mr. Steblin and a third person who's a staff person determined by myself and Mr. Steblin. Any further discussion on that? I will say that this is the last phase of a longer process. The process we entered into 2 years ago was to establish a relationship with a community abroad that we have a tremendous competitive advantage with. Korea has a large population here in Coquitlam. That competitive advantage could translate, as other communities have translated such relationships, into some real economic strength for Coquitlam. Councillor Sikora mentioned the experience in the past, and I recognize that experience. We don't do anything on this council to invite big business. Well, that's one of the things we want to change. We want to make it so that this council reaches out, uses our competitive advantage. This city reaches out and uses our competitive advantage to do business in a different way, to invite business. And I appreciate Councillor Sikora's long experience with all kinds of elements of economic development. I think we can do much better. Other communities have shown the way that the sister city relationships in Vancouver or in Richmond or in Westminster can really be empowering relationships and can help bring business to their community. And I'm hopeful, and I'm working toward the same thing here in Coquitlam, and I know that other council members have supported that initiative. We built the bridge halfway across the river. We ought to complete the bridge. No other speakers? All in favor of the motion as amended? All. We voted on the amendment. There was an amendment, a sub-amendment. We had to vote on each of those. We now have the motion before us.
The motion before us is 3 people?
The motion before us is complete, is engage in the last trip to Korea under this program. The second trip, effectively. No, that was only on the amendment. All in favor of the motion? All opposed to the motion? Councillor Reid, Councillor Sikora, and Councillor Robinson are opposed to the motion. The motion carries. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff, we're now able to return to item 10, and staff has some proposed conditions to put before you. I would invite Ms. Erica Tiffany to introduce those.
Thank you, Mr. Gerbert. Through Your Worship, as I understand, there are 2 proposed conditions for this application. One was the bike storage, that bike storage be provided. In discussions with the applicant, my understanding is that bike storage will be provided to the tune of approximately 3,500 square feet for both towers. The second issue was with regard to the loading space in Tower 1. The applicant is willing to find a location for the loading space. So my recommendation, or I would recommend to the council consider a condition that staff work with the applicant to identify a loading space for Tower 1 as part of the DP authorization.
Excuse me, you forgot about the parking.
Yeah.
With regard to the parking variance, that one's a little more difficult. There are some site constraints. We could go back and work with the applicant with regard to finding some additional parking spaces on the site, but there are site constraints, so I'm not sure exactly how we would address the full removal of all the variances for those parking requirements.
Okay, we're left with staff have come up with a solution for part of the concern. I recognize that the other part of the concern hasn't been addressed. There has been a motion, I forget who moved it. Councillor Asmundson moved that amendment, or that motion, which was to give fourth and final reading subject to that condition and only that condition, other than the conditions contained in the staff report. That's been moved. Is there a seconder?
What's been moved? The parking?
No, that hasn't been touched.
Solution, the staff recommendation with the condition of the solution that was just presented by the planning department.
Okay, and so you're just going to ignore the parking? Parking is a huge issue.
Okay, Councillor, I understand your concern. Councillor Asmundson has moved this amendment to the staff recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Reamer has seconded. We can now debate that, and we can debate its sufficiency. It may be that the parking is something that council isn't as concerned with. It may be that council is sufficiently concerned that this fails, or that there's a subsequent amendment. So I see Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we're giving fourth reading to something with conditions. Now, I think if our solicitor was sitting here, you'd get a legal opinion that you can't do it. Because I'll tell you what, number one, we gave it second and third reading. You gave it fourth and final reading. Fourth and final reading is engraved in stone. It's engraved in stone.
Well, we haven't given it.
Am I correct?
We've given three readings.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If you give this reading, it's fourth and final reading. Fourth and final reading is engraved in stone. And you cannot change things after the fourth and final reading. The developer can tell you to get lost. Okay? Now.
Okay, I'm going to actually ask for staff's opinion on this one, because that's not how I viewed it, and that's not how it was presented to us.
My apologies. The conditions, as I believe were being proposed, were for the development permit, because these are variances to the development permit. So we are addressing the development permit authorization.
But only to a point. To a point. You're not addressing the parking. You not even want to mention it. Now, that's what I'm talking about, fourth and final reading. There where the law is, okay? And I know it very well. So now, number one, when you say there's space constraints, and I understand that. They can certainly go deeper underground in there because there's soil conditions in there. There's no problem. And there we have, we have those cottonwood buildings there, just a little ways away from there. And I'll tell you what, you go there any day or any night, there's cars bumper to bumper. They're parked all over the place because of the density in there it is now, and not enough parking being provided. And now we're going to do something different. We're now going to, allow 95 parking or 91 parking spaces less in a development, and then give it fourth and final reading. With some council members are totally opposed to it. So I don't look. I think and not only that. I feel bad, and I feel bad for this reason also. Is the fact is that we leave it to 0 hour. So if the council members want to do something or massage something, our hands are tied. Now, how did it happen? I'd like to know how that happened, because there's many times between third and fourth reading, you can take a month or two, whatever it is. And here it looks like it was maybe a week or two, and we're now faced with fourth and final reading. And that's what I'd like to have an answer on.
Okay, let's get an answer on that one. I suspect it wasn't staff's wish that we wait till the last minute, but why don't we look at the planning department for an answer?
No, it wasn't staff's wish to wait till the 11th hour. We don't like waiting till the 11th hour as much as council doesn't like waiting till the 11th hour. The applicant has been working quite hard to obtain a final development permit with their co-applicant, which is Safeway.
Okay.
Safeway.
Yeah. Understand. So now,
actually, let's. I'm going to allow Ms. Tiffany to complete this.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
BOZA has been working diligently with Safeway to make this project a reality. It's been a challenge for BOZA to get this application to this point. We have, because of the difficulties in working with the owner of the property, we would like very much to see this application move forward, because it's a critical element to achieving the Transit Village commercial uses around the future Evergreen Light Rail or LRT station. It's also going to be a catalyst for the Coquitlam neighborhood plan. It's not staff's preference that it comes down to the 11th hour, because it puts us all in a very difficult situation, but at the same time we are quite concerned that without proceeding forward at this time, that we might not see redevelopment on this site.
So to me, now, see, you know, they had challenges with the Safeway, that's fine. Maybe they rushed up this to the public hearing before they were quite ready. Maybe they had a lot of legwork to do before they rushed it up. And maybe that was the answer for it. But I'm not going to sit here and cut off my head for something that'd be a catalyst for something that may look good or something might happen. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to support anything that is so many stalls that are short under in a building that needs a little more attention than with that. So I'd wish that this wasn't before us for fourth and final reading here tonight, because I know what the outcome would be. If illegally, is they have to put the parking space, they'd have to go back to public hearing because substantive changes. So, you know, and I can't support it. So now I really feel bad about this. I really do.
I just want to clarify. The public hearing was on the zoning. We gave readings and we've passed the zoning. Before us tonight is the fourth and final reading to the zoning amendment. But that doesn't have anything to do with the parking. The parking is in the development permit.
We don't want to talk about it.
The development permit includes the parking requirements. It includes the loading requirements, the bike storage, all of those other conditions. And we're before us now with an amendment that would include an additional condition that staff will have to work out with the proponent for the signing before the development permit actually gets a condition on the development permit. So I'm not uncomfortable proceeding with this. Let's face it, if we build transit-oriented neighborhoods, we have to refine our parking requirements. If they're on top of a transit station, we should anticipate less parking requirement. And if we don't anticipate that, we're going to be building in, as other communities have done, a bunch of empty parking spaces 2.5, 3 stories down in the underground parking. So I'm not uncomfortable there. I realize it's a balancing act. Staff have recommended that we go forward with this. I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation and the analysis they've done. And the condition that is before us tonight is only the condition moved as an amendment, the condition on a loading bay solution that the council has some concerns about. And I agree that the loading bay needs to be dealt with because we have the same challenges here in the city centre. So we'll go through the rest of the speakers list. Councillor Reid.
I believe somehow they might be tied, and I feel that once we give fourth and final reading, we rezone the site, correct? And it's written in stone, as Councillor Sikora says. But then, if we just deal with the development permit application, we can still lose our parking, right? Can he go ahead and build and ignore our development application? If I put a constraint that he must abide by this application report for parking, what happens? He's already got fourth and final. What happens?
The park, through your worship, the parking is dealt through the development permit application, not the rezoning. So in terms of the development permit application, we would deal with all the variances through that authorization. So that is separate from the rezoning question.
So he would not be able, he or she would not be able to go ahead and build these 2 towers unless this development application was approved.
That's correct.
Even though they have fourth and final reading.
That is correct.
Okay. I still want to have something to do with parking. You came back with the other 2 you explained, but parking is my big issue. You know, what's bothering me about this is we're talking about the Coquitlam site. We've got these 2 towers. We know from 10 years ago or so that Morguard's looking at 3 towers perhaps on the other side of the property. We could have 5 towers on that site. And once we give somebody 90 spaces off, what do you think the other guys are going to do? We're going to be maybe 500 spaces short on that site. And then figure out how the transit police are going to come when they find people visiting people in their apartments. Maybe the person living in that apartment doesn't have a car, but they might actually know another person on the planet who might have a car to drive and visit them. At least they'd have a place to park. Because what's going to happen is it's going to be a nightmare for us. We're going to be sitting there with Well, if there's 300 units there, we could be sitting there with 1,000, 1,500 units sitting on that site, which we all know very well, and be 500 parking spots short. It's not what I want for the community. It's not what I want for the people that live there. And I think we're just creating ourselves a dog's breakfast if we start now. So I am adamant on the parking, or I won't support any of this. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand this parking issue, how it came to be. This came up at our land use meeting a week ago, and now we're here this evening talking about it again. So I guess my question is, has staff gone over the parking issue within this 1 week period with the proponent? And is this a matter that they are simply unable to do it? Or is it a matter that they don't want to do it?
Through your worship, staff believe that there are site constraints with regard to providing all the parking. Namely, there's a Safeway development associated with it. It has its allocation of parking. It is a constraint, a physical constraint to the west side of where the two towers are proposed to go. And then you've got the remaining portion of the park, which is a fairly constrained site in terms of the amount of land area available and the amount of underground space that's available to actually physically provide all of the parking spaces that are required through the zoning bylaw. However, as I've pointed out before, and I understand Councillor Reid's concerns, it has been planning department staff policy in the OCP that we support through policy a 30% reduction in parking in these areas. And in return for that, the applicant has provided for bikes, storage facilities, and other measures to help encourage alternative uses of transportation. So in answer to your question, yeah, we do believe there are some real constraints here.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to support this application. I think that we need to move forward with this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to try and get my mind straight on this. Ms. Tiffany talked about time limits. A 6-month extension was granted. That time runs out tonight, effectively. That extension, as I see it, applies only to the zoning amendment. Is that right?
Your Worship, yes, that's correct.
So we could deal with the zoning amendment and not be precluded from deferring the DVP to another meeting, to additional information.
That is correct.
I move we separate these, Your Worship.
Just a clarification, this is the development permit, not a DVP, and the motion is to separate. We're going to divide the two, or is there a seconder? Seconder to dividing them? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Robinson seconds.
If I can speak to that.
Go right ahead.
I don't think there's any question that everybody at the table wants this development to go ahead. We want to see the beginning of the redevelopment of Coquitlam, preparation for the SkyTrain coming by, and all that. But parking is an issue. And I can't remember exactly. I believe that I heard this discussed when I was sitting on the other side of the footlights. And we haven't had a really great answer yet. We're told there are site constraints. It seems to me that one can do what one has the will to do, and I am yet to be convinced that this level of reduction in parking is appropriate even in a transit-oriented village. But I would be more than happy to see approval, fourth and final reading of the zoning bylaw, and deferring approval of the development permit application, even if only for a week, so that we got more and better information, so that staff could work with the proponent to try and satisfy the reservations that are much better expressed by people like Councillor Reid than by me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson. No. Counts. Actually, I asked a question of staff, and I wanted to get a clarification of something. We have the ability to divide these two and vote on them separately, and typically we normally allow as a council anyone that needs to have something divided. We have, by a matter of practice, done that. The challenge here, and I think we have a certain amount of clout before we give zoning. We have less clout as a council after we give zoning. So I want us to keep in mind that if in fact we think that the development permit will pass tonight, that's fine. But if we're contemplating granting zoning and then deferring the other, the city will have fewer tools with which to approach a responsible developer nonetheless, but with which to negotiate with the developer. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I want to speak on the main. Do I speak to deferral, or can I speak to the motion that was on?
Right now, we're only on dividing. Speaking to dividing? Nope.
We're on what?
On the division, and the dividing the motions. The motion is to divide. All in favor of division. All opposed. I see Councillor Reamer, Councillor Asmussen, Councillor Sikora, Councillor Reid, and Councillor Lynch are opposed at least, and that allows that to fail. The two recommendations are before us. The rezoning, by way of explanation, there's a rezoning and there's a development permit. The development permit has all the conditions associated with the building. The rezoning is simply to allow a high-rise tower with mixed use there. So, right now we've got Councillor Sikora and Councillor Asmussen.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The one thing again I must add, that the fact is once you give it fourth and final reading, it's engraved in stone.
Yeah, we know
If this developer is a hard-nosed developer, he comes to the city, he's got the rezoning, I want the permit, and you cannot refuse him. The courts will grant them the approval to build. See, because once in fourth and final reading, it's engraved. And how I know it is very simple. Going back about 20-odd years ago, there's a court case in Coquitlam where council members voted third reading to a zoning bylaw, okay? And the fourth and final got defeated. And this gentleman took us to court, and the lawyer and the judge said, the council members have every right to change their mind before fourth and final reading. Had this development would have got fourth and final reading, there's no way council members could have reversed it. So that was a reading about 20 years ago, and I don't think it changed much. You know, fourth and final reading is a Bible. Okay?
Okay. Now, and let's keep in mind, though, that there are two fourth and final readings before us tonight. The fourth and final on the zoning, which would permit a certain land use, but within certain land uses, a building permit is an automatic thing. You don't need a development permit for a single-family home, for example, but in this zone, you need a development permit. So he's applied for a development permit, and that is before us at fourth and final. And if we don't grant it tonight, he can't get a building permit because he doesn't have a development permit. So he needs both of those to be approved tonight, right? No. He needs both of those to be approved tonight in order to proceed tomorrow and get a building permit. There is a condition proposed against this, and it's before us now. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. And I've been waiting for Councillor Reid that Ms. Tiffany mentioned that she could also work with the proponent to see where they could find to increase more parking, not to maybe the standards, but to work with them. And they're willing to look at that to find any more parking with the constrained site. So I would add that to my motion to have them come back with the proponent to find more parking. What I want to point out, though, within the report here,
I'm not sure that staff can accept that as instructions to staff. It's not a motion, and I'm not sure it can be a motion.
I said add it to the motion, the present motion that I made. And is that pardon?
You'll have to do it as another secondary amendment in the interest of being as confusing as we possibly can tonight.
I'll move that.
And what is the motion?
I'm going to ask, before you second it, I'm going to actually ask Councillor Asmussen for the wording of his motion.
As was explained to Ms. Tiffany, as we spoke before, you said that the proponent is willing to work to find some more parking in the development and that you'll work with them. So my thing is to you that plus the loading zone, that staff will go back, work with the proponent to find where they can with this site some more parking. And that's the direction.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lynch. I'm going to speak to that one. I don't think we can do that. I'm opposed to it actually. I think staff's recommendation is less than they normally do, is to reduce the parking requirements in this building as other communities do in buildings right on top of a SkyTrain station. If we don't think SkyTrain is coming, let's not approve this rezoning because it's inappropriate if SkyTrain isn't coming. But we know SkyTrain is coming. We're working with staff right now on that, and that means we can't be building a bunch of empty parking spaces. It's a waste of resources. Parking spaces in an unconstrained site, structured parking is $40,000 a space. In a constrained site, structured parking can be much more than that in order to find that extra parking space. And I'm reluctant to have anybody spend $1 million building an extra bunch of parking spaces underground that will subsequently be rented out by Impark at $1 a day or something like that because we built too much in the building. The purpose of our parking requirements was to satisfy the parking need. In a transit-oriented development, the purpose of parking requirements that are reduced is to make sure that we're encouraging the use of public transit and supporting those people who don't want to spend the extra $40,000 to get 2 parking spaces for their one unit, their one apartment unit or one condominium unit. So I'm going to be opposed to that. Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for the knowledge of Council, I've enabled QB for the sub-amendment and given the 4 identified speakers already because there was an interest.
Very good. Thank you very much.
If people are wondering why their lights changed.
While I was commenting, we've added a QB, which is the sub-amendment. We're going to Councillor Lynch, Councillor Asmussen, Councillor Sikora, and Councillor Reamer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I seconded the amendment because there's been some concern raised around this table of councillors of the amount of parking that's being provided, and there's a real possibility that this could go down to defeat if we don't come to some resolution. I think what we've been instructed or advised by our staff is not that they're going to be able to come anywhere near the 91 stalls they're asking to be reduced. They're not going to find those 91 stalls. What they're going to do is they're going to look within the constraints to see if there's any possibility of adding some stalls. We may find an additional 10 stalls, 12 stalls. I think the idea is to find any additional stalls that the developer can do without substantially changing the design of the development. I think that's a reasonable request, especially based on the comments we've been hearing around here. And I think it's probably something the applicant not only be willing to do, would be advisable to do. And there is still that niche market of people who do need to have vehicles to drive because of their employment. And I think this satisfies that niche as well.
Very well. We now have 7 council members in the queue. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, that was my intent. I thank Councillor Lynch for explaining. And I also want to point out that we're looking at not a 30% originally, but a 20%. In the parking reduction in there. It goes up to 30%, but the proponent's only at a 20% parking reduction. I understand, Mayor Stewart, that your position, and I understand in transit-oriented areas, but we also have in the city centre here a shortage of parking. And I understand Councillor Reid's position. What I'm trying to do is what Councillor Lynch said, not to fulfill the whole 91, but there is the ability to 5, 10 more spots, if it's possible. It may come back that they're because of the constraints, but to have staff have the authority to work with the proponent to make this application move through. I don't want to see this defeated. So that's my intent in adding that into it to hopefully satisfy some of those concerns about the parking reduction. And if you got another 10 stalls, you'd be down to maybe 18% reduction rather than the 20% that's proposed in. But I also want to make that clear that it's not a 30% reduction. It's only a 20% reduction, as in the report, of the parking requirements because of a transit-oriented area. Thank you.
Point well taken. Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. See, and they're working with a package that's constrained, and they know what the parking standards are. So, I'm sure the developer is going for maximum heights in these buildings rather than saying, well, I can't provide the parking spaces, so maybe you have to make the building about 3 or 4 stories lower. That can happen to accommodate the parking spaces. But no, they want both. And I'm not prepared to give them both. I know what their problems are and all that, and my heart will not bleed for them at all, because I'll tell you what, we have had a fill of people want. They want to come to this community, develop buildings, build buildings. I want them to do so. But I'll tell you, at the taxpayers' expense or at our expense and that type of deal, and create us a bunch of problems. They'll build, they'll sell, they're gone. Who's left with the headaches? The residents of this community, and we are as councillors and that type. And again, you give it fourth and final reading tonight. He can come in tomorrow and ask for a building permit, and you can't deny it to him. And that's the very end of the story. And I'll tell you, I hope somebody challenges me and say, no, he's wrong. We can withhold a lot of things because you cannot withhold anything after fourth and final reading. Or put a whole bunch of subjects after fourth and final reading.
Well, and before us tonight are the subjects before fourth and final reading, and Councillor McDonnell on that.
Thank you. First of all, this is going to be a beautiful development once it gets finished. I'm going to get to the amendment here.
You have all of 5 minutes. Yeah. I'll start the clock.
First of all, I'd like to thank staff for talking with the proponent and getting the off-road loading zone. I think that was very important, I think, to the area around there. I understand this is difficult because there are lots of townhouses and other busy buildings around in the area. However, it is a transit-oriented development, and it's also buyer beware. If you are going to move into a development you're not going to get all the parking spots, you're going to know that before you buy it. Will there be problems down the road? I hope not. I desperately hope that our staff can work with the proponent and find some extra parking as much as possible would be preferable. But the way it stands now, I'm with the amendments or with the proposed amendments. I'm going to support this, and I'm hopeful that this will pass and get on with it. This 20% reduction is, I don't think it's asking too much. Not at a proposed SkyTrain station, and if we can deplete that even further from 20% down to 18, 17, or even 16%, obviously that would be better. But I'll be supportive of where we're at now. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, folks, it's time to do some adding and subtracting. If you look at your development application here, you're going to see that our bylaw requirement, this is what we had 2 weeks ago at our meeting, resident off-street parking was 441 spaces. They proposed 405 spaces. They had visitor at 68, and they proposed 34. So after staff have talked to them on page 2, dated July 16th, it has another little graph here, and it now tells us that at revised in Tower 1, they're going to have 188, and Tower 2 is going to have 204. So if you add those up, it comes to 392. Which is an interesting number to keep because it's going to have 334 suites and 6 townhouses, which total 340 if everyone has one car. So for 340 units, we're going to have 52 visitor stalls. So only 25% of these folks are going to have friends at the same time, which I think is a little low. And I just don't think it's very good. What we have revised is they show 50, but if you just if you start adding up the numbers in both reports, that's where we are. And I just don't think that's adequate. So if we take all these visitor spots off, Where are people going to park? Where? They're going to park in the Safeway zones. They're going to park all over the place. And this is the first one. So do that for 5 high-rise towers. Even at 52, you're 260 spaces short in one little tiny place. We all go to Newport Village. We all love it. It's beautiful. The parking there is packed. It's really hard to find parking on that space, and I'm looking at that as sort of a nicely confined space, and I think they did a beautiful job there. They got lots of underground visitor for everybody. But this is just the start of a nightmare, so I'm having real difficulties with this parking.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, I certainly appreciate the anxiety about parking, but this is also our very first commercial or C7 zone, and so we don't really have anything to go by because we haven't done this before. And I think that it requires some great staff consultation because we're not the first community to do this. Certainly other communities have done it, and I suspect they have found a way to make it work because they keep doing it. And if it was really a huge problem, that they wouldn't do it. So I want to just check with Ms. Tiffany. Other communities, is this the kind of variance that they have that's been supported where there are transit-oriented communities? Has this worked?
Ms. Tiffany.
Thank you, Your Worship. In answer to Councillor Robinson's question, my understanding is that the City of Burnaby also has reductions in parking requirements around their SkyTrain stations. Several months ago, I think Transportation Services staff did a survey with the Burnaby staff, and they discovered that typically the developments around those SkyTrain stations are the parking stalls are provided on a ratio of 1 stall per dwelling unit. So I don't know what I can't speak firsthand to what the exact experiences have been around where there are parking issues along the street, but in answer to your question, my understanding is no, this is not out of alignment with what other municipalities with SkyTrain service have.
Okay, and the other question I have has to do with the amendment. Will this be a deal breaker if this amendment goes through, if we support what Councillor Asmundson suggested? Do you think, the proponent will say, forget it, I can't squeeze anymore and just forget the whole thing? Or are they the kind of proponent that would say, well, let's just take a look and see if we can squeeze out a few more here or a few more there? I just want to know if this is going to be a deal breaker.
In terms of pursuing further reductions in parking, I don't think it will be an absolute deal breaker. There are site constraints, as I said before. It is a deal breaker to provide all of the parking requirements under the zoning bylaw. And as I have said before, the understanding with the applicant is that they were working with a neighborhood plan policy that supported 30% reduction in parking.
Okay. Thank you. For me, this is, I think we need to support this. We have, I appreciate the anxiety. We haven't done this before, but I think we need to keep moving this forward. We're also moving into sort of, I believe, a different generation where there are families who, some families will continue to have 2 cars, but really there are many families who only have 1 and some who have none. And with a transit-oriented community with SkyTrain there, we're trying to, again, predict and look into a crystal ball. And I think that given that we're not the first community to do this, I think this is a pretty safe bet that it will be okay. There might be some challenges, but I think that we're up to it, and I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm in a similar vein. I suspect that we're taking baby steps in a direction that other communities have gone. They've probably approached it with the same trepidation, and I suspect found, as I've talked to other council members in other communities, that it's true that the people that buy units around a transit station are people who value the transit station and may well be more likely to use it, and therefore more likely to own not the second family car. So I don't have the trepidation here because others have done it, others have gone down that path, and I think we're going to find that we're being conservative here, but conservative is good because we do have to we do have to make sure that we're not creating a problem at the beginning of what's going to be a really exciting redevelopment. So the motion on the floor right now is the sub-amendment, which would add the parking language to the loading language that is the amendment. Everyone comfortable with that? Councillor Reamer.
The parking language, I just wanted to clarify that, how that will read.
Mr. Clerk, could you read back the parking language?
Yes, I can. The parking language is that staff will work with the proponent to find or otherwise identify additional parking.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
As one of the conditions of the development permit.
Perfect.
Okay. I assume it's a clarification.
Oh, it's a clarification. When we sent it back 2 weeks ago for more parking, we lost 47 spaces between 2 weeks ago and tonight. So somehow something's missing. We sent it back for more spaces, and now I've got even less spaces.
Okay, well, this time that can't happen because at the bare minimum is the current parking. Okay, so we're comfortable with where we're at. All in favor of the sub-amendment? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. The sub-amendment carries. The amendment that we're going to be voting on now is both the loading bay and the looking for increased parking. That's as one amendment to the motion. And we've come back with Q.
But many councillors may wish to withdraw their name.
Okay, now if you've just activated your microphone, you've probably just canceled your microphone. Councillor Asmussen, I used to have 4 on there, and now there's only 1. Nobody wants to speak to this. Okay, very good. We're tiring. It's been about 8 hours of continuous meetings this afternoon, so the motion before us is the parking requirements and the loading bay requirements added to, it's an amendment. So all in favor of this amendment? All opposed to this amendment? This amendment carries. We're now at the motion as amended, which is the fourth and final reading of the zoning amendment, unamended, and the fourth and final reading of the signing and sealing of the development permit as amended twice. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. We have refined this sufficiently to carry unanimously. A pretty complex development. I applaud council and the committee. I applaud the land use committee for a lot of work on this. This is going to be a significant beginning to a development that I think will make a real difference in the Coquitlam area. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have one additional item. It's the naming of Mackin Park Southfield as Kevin Chin Field. The recommendation is that Council approve the naming of Mackin Park Southfield as Kevin Chin Field.
We could hold on. I'm going to ask Councillor McDonnell, who's the chair of the Recreation, Sport and Culture Standing Committee, to move the motion and then speak to it.
Thank you. I'd like to move this.
I'll second.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you very much. This has come to us from the Coquitlam Field Sport Association, asking us to name a field at Mackin Park after Kevin Chin, a well-known Coquitlam resident who coached football in our community at the community level, as well as being a math teacher and the head coach of football at Centennial High School. Kevin was a real popular mentor, a valued member of the sports community in Coquitlam, and I'm very, very pleased on behalf of Coquitlam Field Sport Association to put Kevin's name forward to bear the name of the field where football is centered down at Mackin Park. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. Are there any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, the motion is to rename the field Kevin Chin Field. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's the last formal item on the agenda.
Councillor Robinson.
I just have a round-the-table item, just to
go right ahead.
To share. I just want to remind Mayor Stewart that we have a Tri-City Food Bank Challenge once again this year.
Actually, you have a Tri-City Food Bank Challenge again this year.
And that's part of the Christmas in July campaign for the Share Food Bank, and that the other mayors, Greg Moore and Joe Tressolini, have also, and their councils have joined in the food challenge and invited all of our respective staff and our residents to contribute. And this year, our buildings, our Chimo Pool, the City Center Pool, libraries, Glen Pine Pavilion, and City Hall are all drop-off locations. There will be a weigh-in of food on August 16th, so we're going to get a little competitive with the idea of which city can bring in the most food for the food bank. And Mayor Stewart, you've been offered up to the altar again. And if we don't win, you're going to have to wear somebody else's T-shirt, the winner's T-shirt, at the first council meeting in September. So I encourage all of our residents and our council to make some phone calls and encourage residents to contribute, so that it's the other mayors that have to wear the I Love Coquitlam T-shirt.
You know, I got to speak to this, because year after year you come up with these silly things where I end up having to wear a shirt because she made some promise. I think we should have a motion to reject that. Anybody? Oh, you're kind. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to this. July is a time when we're all celebrating the summer. For a lot of families, it isn't as fun as that. It's a challenging time for lots of families. Lots of families spend all their year struggling, trying to get the next meal on the table. And this is an opportunity for all of us who get out and enjoy the summer, but also put a couple of canned goods and a few items in a basket and bring them down to City Hall, bring them to the swimming pool. Let's help support those folks who don't have it very much this time of year. And I thank all of council for their support. And let's win. Let's get this one done. But most important, let's support those families. Any other items? Actually, there was, I do want to acknowledge the tremendous work at the Blue Mountain Music Festival on the weekend. I thought there was I saw council members there partying it up, enjoying wonderful music, and I want to thank all the organizers, all the sponsors, and everyone that put that together. We do great festivals in Coquitlam, and that was a great one. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor of adjournment? All opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And as is our custom following adjournment, we have an opportunity to ask questions on tonight's agenda. Are there any questions on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Thank you all for coming.